Here in the United States, a lot of the energy debate is talking about moving from fossil fuels toward renewables for reasons of security and independence and climate change. So how does that compare with your energy strategy in Jordan?
I think it's quite similar. Jordan imports most of its energy from outside. Mm-hmm. We import 96% of our energy from outside Jordan. We don't have oil, although we are in the middle of oil-producing countries. Last year we spent 13% of our GDP on energy import. We import 60% of our energy oil, and the rest, the 36%, comes from natural gas from Egypt. So that made us think to develop different resources locally and to try to diversify the energy resources in Jordan. And that's why an energy strategy was developed 2008 till 2020, where we tried to increase the renewable energy mix to 10%.
What is it right now?
Now it's less than 1%. We don't have...
is that mainly solar?
Mainly solar and some wind, but it is less than 1%. The rest should come from oil shale. Jordan has large reserves of oil shale. We're maybe the third countries in the world in oil shale reserve. However, oil shale, as you know, before the technologies and the environmental concerns were constraints to the development of oil shale. Now, with the oil prices increase and the improvement of technologies, we believe in 4 to 5 years we will be able to produce oil from oil shale, and that will contribute to 14%. We are trying to balance between the high cost of importing oil from outside, at the same time having the environmental concerns and exploring our own oil shale that exists in Jordan.
And you used to be the environment minister in Jordan. Are you satisfied with the environmental controls? The oil shales are pretty dirty source of energy.
Oil shale are dirty, yes, and we need to be very aware of that, but at the same time have this balance of our trying to explore our own resources.
Sounds similar to some things that happens here in the United States. We have lots of coal, and while it's dirty, at least it's our own. We control the supply. We're not dependent on an external supplier. Is that?
However, you have a different problem. In coal exploration, you are worried about CO2 emissions.
Sure.
Jordan contributes only to 0.1% of CO2 emissions. So it's insignificant in terms of it's 20 million tons of CO2 a year, which is maybe one of your coal power plants matches the whole emissions of Jordan. So our concerns are related to water contamination, related to the way we mine we mine the oil shale. So our concerns, environmental concerns, are more localized than the linkages with climate change.
Well, you mentioned a good point about sort of the relative intensity of greenhouse gases. How do you view the current negotiations, the current move toward a global agreement? Should it be on a per capita basis? How should the framework be for a global deal on carbon?
Whether it is per capita or overall, I think definitely we should pay the right price of oil that contributes to the pollution. We're not paying the right price of oil, and that's why other sources of clean energy are not excelling as fast as they should. If you look at the subsidy on fossil fuel in the world, there is definitely imbalance with other resources. You have more than $300 billion worth of subsidy on fossil fuel.
Globally per year.
And so if you compare it, for example, with renewable, and I am a strong advocate for renewable energy resources, it's less than 8 billion so it's total imbalance between subsidies, and that's why it's not easy to compare and to say, well, the renewable energy is still high cost. High cost because we're not calculating the real costs.
Right, and because the costs of the subsidies are not fully disclosed. I've heard numbers from reliable sources of $50 billion just in the U.S. of subsidy of fossil fuels in different
Exactly,
ways.
and that makes the imbalanced comparisons.
Why do you think the momentum slowed down toward a global deal?
I don't see enough commitment, and maybe there are some procedural issues, some legal issues related to to countries like United States, for example. I know there is a bill on climate change, but it's taking some more time than maybe people outside the United States expected.
Or can understand. Yeah. Does it seem strange to you why it's taking us so long?
And countries also like China, which is now the largest polluter.
But also in many ways the largest innovator or adopter of clean technologies.
Absolutely.
When you look at energy leadership, do you look to the United States, or do you look to China, or does it depend on the sector and the company?
I think it depends on the sector. Today, and through my visit in the United States, we saw and we met lots of companies who are investing in renewable energy.
There's one company, eSolar, which is in Pasadena, that I believe is involved with a concentrated solar plant in Jordan. Is that going to be something big for you?
Yes, absolutely. Jordan has high solar radiation. We are part of the Sun Belt. We are one among the highest in the world, and we can capitalize on the solar power. We're working on 2 or 3 projects on concentrated solar power that are 100 megawatts each. So this is massive too.
But it takes a lot of water. And
No,
you don't have much water.
We don't have much water, but there are now new technologies that have a closed system and use different brackish water. And hopefully this is what we're exploring with the eSolar and others, to see how we can minimize the use of the water and try to depend on different systems.
We had a U.S. Admiral retired here recently who talked about the need for the U.S. economy and industrialized economies to move away from fossil fuels. And when that happens, he talked about a gradual drawdown of U.S. military forces in the Middle East, which are there largely to protect supply lines. So is that part of your scenario thinking? And how do you think that would affect the balance in the Middle East if the U.S. and Europe really pulled back on their consumption of fossil fuels?
Well, if we're talking about climate change, definitely the less burning of fossil fuel, the more we contribute less to climate change. And countries like the United States, we look for their leadership in this field. Countries like China and other countries who consume lots of fossil fuel, it's important to take those measures, whether in the different sectors, whether it is in the army or in the different sectors, and try gradually to depend less on fossil fuel and increase the clean energy.
But your neighbors are so dependent on fossil fuels for their economies. How would a shift away from fossil fuels affect the economics of the Middle Eastern region?
Well, there will be continuous need. If you look at the demand from a global point of view,
Sure.
there will be continuous need for oil. So there is no problem for oil-producing countries. I don't see a problem for them for the coming 30, 40 years, because the demand on oil and fossil fuel is excelling. But however, we need to take different measures. For us, we're not major consumers of compared to the amount they are producing. But I don't see real effect. However, if you look at the Abu Dhabi, for example, they are an oil-producing country, but at the same time, they are trying to develop and play a leadership role in the Gulf area in renewable energy. They are now building a special city that is carbon balanced.
Masdar, sure.
Masdar, and so, but they have lots of oil, and this shows long-term vision, and this shows balance between the dependency on fossil fuel, but at the same time diversifying the sources of energy.